So we started this series on Nest.js and we are trying out, or we are gradually building out a blog API. Okay, and so last time we went through, let me just give a brief rundown, but I have a GitHub repository that I would link in the description, and I'm also going to link the video up here to the last, to the beginning that we went through. So what do we currently have? We have a post section. As I said, we are building out an online blog, and we have a post feature that we just have a DTO that validates the post. And if we check out our controller, we have methods that can get all posts, get a post with a particular ID, or can create a post. Okay, and these are the requests we can send. So we can send the request to get all posts. Obviously, I have to start the development server. Okay, so we can send off this request to get all the posts. We can send it to get a post with a specific ID, and we can obviously go on to create a post. But what's going on is this is happening in memory. So if we check our post service, so all these are just hard-coded stuff. So we are going to move away from hard-coded stuff, and we are going to create a database. Okay, and we'll be using TypeOrm to be able to discuss with the database we are going to create. All right, so getting started, I would go over to the terminal, and we need to install some packages. All right, we need to install some packages, and I'm going to say npm install at nestjs/typeorm. I'm also going to install TypeOrm and then SQLite 3. So we'll be using TypeOrm and SQLite as our database. Okay, just for us to create a CRUD operation. So we're going to create a post, update, delete, and also get a post with a specific ID. So while that is going on, we need to configure the different packages that we just installed. So we need to configure our database. And for us to configure our database, we'll do that in the app module. Okay, so in our app module, we need to import some stuff. So we need to obviously import some stuff from these packages we're installing. So I'll be back once it's done. So our package is done installing, and let's go on to wire up our database. And first off, we need to import the TypeOrm module. So TypeOrm module is going to be coming from the Nest.js TypeOrm package. And in order to configure TypeOrm in our project, we are going to come to the imports array, and because we are going to do this globally, okay, we are going to configure TypeOrm globally. So we are going to use the TypeOrm module, and we'll call the for_root method, okay, to configure it in the root of our application, and we pass some options. So the first option we are going to pass is the type. So what type of database is this? And we're going to say it's an SQLite database. So it has options. So if you do control space, you're going to see the different database that is being supported. Okay, in our case it's SQLite. We also have the database. So what name is this database going to be called? So we're going to call it db.sqlite, and we have entities. For now, we don't have any entity, which is what we are going to create next. Okay, and lastly, we say synchronize true. This is a very important setting which you would not want to do in production. So in production, don't do this in production. And basically the reason is we want to be able to migrate our database on our own, and because we are currently in development, so TypeOrm is going to help us to match the different columns that we have to our database. But in production, this is obviously a bad idea, so you don't get to delete some columns and stuff like that. Okay, so now with these settings, if we get to save, we should see a database with the name db.sqlite on the root of our project. Okay, so now this is our database, db.sqlite. Now let's go on to create an entity. And because we started off with the post feature of our application, so what we are going to do in our post directory, we are going to create a post.entity.ts. And basically an entity, different fields that we expect our posts to have. Okay, and we are going to say our post is going to obviously be a class. So we're going to export a class that we'll call post, okay, like this, and it's going to have a column. So the first column, column needs to be imported from TypeOrm, and column means obviously a column in our database, okay? And it's going to have a heading, and a heading that is going to be a string, like this, okay? So we're going to have another column, and this column is going to be for the content, that is for the actual post, and it's going to be a string like this. And we can have another column. So let's say we have administrative rights in our project, and we need only an admin to publish a post. Okay, so we're going to say is published. It's going to be of type boolean. Okay, and initially we don't need, or we don't want this post to be published. So the default is going to be false. So by default, we don't have a published post. Okay, so now that's it, but it's not done because our post needs to have an ID. So an ID is going to be a primary generated column because we need it to auto increase automatically. So SQLite is going to map our IDs to the particular post. So an ID of 1, an ID of 2, and stuff like that. So this ID is going to be a number. So it's going to be of type number. And our post is also going to have a created at column. So created date. So create date column is going to be imported from TypeOrm. So we are going to say created at, which is going to be of type date. And we also need an updated at column. So update date column. So updated at, which is going to be of type date. So this is it. Primary generated column is going to be given to us automatically by SQLite, by SQL, and it's going to start saving our database by increasing it from 1 to 2. Okay. We also have date for created at. So whenever we create a date, automatically we are going to have the date that this post was created, and also whenever we update a post, we are going to have the date of updating this post. So that's what this these columns are doing. But in our application, we are going to, let's say we have a user entity. Let's say we also have another entity. So we obviously might need the entity to always have primary generated column for an ID, a created at, and an updated at. And these are the core entities that would have in our application. So let's strip this from here so that we can make it reusable. In order for us to do that, we are going to use the nestjs to generate a module, which I would call common. So these are things that we will be sharing amongst our application, okay? And this would now generate another module called the common module. And here I'm going to create an entity that I'll call call.entity.ts. Okay, and now what I'm going to do here, I'm going to cut these three entities that we are going to have to be reused, and I'm going to paste them in our core entity like this. So I'm going to export a class that I will call core entity. Okay, and I'm going to paste this over here. Obviously we need to import all of these from TypeOrm, so, and also update date column here. So now this is our core entity, and what we're going to do now, we need to link up this core entity with this post. Okay, so we are going to extend. So we'll say export class post is going to extend from our core entity like this. So we're going to extend our core entity, and whichever entity we create is always going to be extending from the core entity like this. Okay, now we have our entity. What next? We need to add this entity to our application. Okay, because if you come back to our app module, we have an entities array that is empty. Okay, and now in order for us to add it, we just bring our post like this, not from nest command, but from the post entity we just created. Now we have an entity, and this is one way of wiring up our entity to in our application. Okay, but we're not done yet, because now our service is also going to need a repository. Our service is going to need to discuss with this entity. And to give our service a repository that we would inject in our post service like this, we are going to come to our post module, and in our imports array like this, we are going to also use the TypeOrm module. So the TypeOrm module, and we're going to call for feature this time around, and it needs entities. Okay, and entities is going to be an array, so we're going to give it our post entity like this. So now this would create a repository that we would be able to inject in our post service. Okay, so now this is our post service. We no longer need the hard-coded data. We are no longer going to be working with this hard-coded data. Okay, so let's inject our repository into this service. So we are going to inject it in the constructor here. And in order for us to inject it, we are going to use the @inject repository coming from nestjs TypeOrm. Okay, we're going to call it like this, and it needs an entity. We're going to call our post entity, not from nest common, but from our post entity like this. And then we're going to define a private read only variable in our class, our post class, that we will call repo, short for repository. And this is going to take the type, or be the type of what repository, coming from TypeOrm, which is a generic type, and we're going to say this is going to be of repository of post like this, our post repository. So with this line over here, we have been able to inject the repository in our service. Now we can call TypeOrm methods on this repository. Okay, first we have our find all, and to find the post, we no longer need to return hard-coded data here. We're going to make this method async like this. Okay, and we're going to say const post. Okay, is going to be await this dot repo, and now dot what, so dot find, and find is going to return an array of the post, and we can now return this post to the controller to handle. Okay, so that's one. We also have find, so I'm going to quickly change this to find one, and we're going to find one post by ID. So if we go back to our core entity, we see that ID is a number. Okay, so we are working with numbers here, so I'm going to actually change this to number like this, and we're going to say post is going to be await this dot repo dot find one. Okay, so find one, and how do we execute this? So it needs options, so we're going to find one post where, and then an object where the ID is equal to this ID over here. Okay, now we need also to make this async like this. Now we can find the post, and we might not be able to find the post if we go on to, if we are not able to find the post. So if there is no post, we can throw a new error. So throw a new not found exception. Okay, not found exception is going to be imported from Nest.js common here. Okay, and with an error message. So we can say no post found with, or no post associated with the given ID. Okay, so in case we don't find the post, this is what we are going to return over to the controller and then to the client. But if we if we found the post, then we're just going to go on and return the post. Okay, so how about creating a post? Now, creating a post, we already have our post create post DTO defined. Okay, we are getting this error from the controller. We'll go there in a minute. Okay, and here let's take a look at what we have. So we have a heading and we have a description. So we can go on to change this, okay, because now we have content like this. Because if we check out our core entity, sorry, our post entity here, we need heading, content, and is published. So by default, a post is not going to be published, so we don't need to take this from the front end. Okay, so we're going to have a content which is of type string, and this is it. So coming back to our post service, we already have an error because we don't need a description like this. So I'm going to take this off. I'm going to say cost post entity is going to be equal to this dot repo dot create. Okay, and we're going to create based on the post that we receive. And why did I call this entity? If we hover over create, it says it creates a new entity instance. Okay, so this create method does not actually save directly in the database. So this just creates an instance, and in order for us to save this post in our database, we can now have a created post like this. Is going to be, and now we await this dot repo and then dot save. So the save method is going to save our post here. Okay, so that's what's going on here. So save saves an entity in the database, creates a new entity instance. Okay, so we're now going to return our created post. So that's it for create. Let's go on to define an update method. So async update is going to take in an ID, which is a number, and we also need the body of the post we want to update. So I'm going to call this data like this. Okay, and in order for us to update our post, we also need a DTO. Okay, a post update DTO, because in creating a post, we must always provide a heading, and we must also go on to provide a content. But in updating a post, we just need, all these fields are optional. So heading is optional and content is optional. Okay, so I'm going to come to DTOs and I'm going to create an update post.dto.ts. And update post would look much like create post. So I'll copy all that we have here and come over to update post, and I'm going to change this to update post DTO like this. And we also need a heading, we need a content, but these fields are optional. Okay, they are not always going to be present, and that's why we also have is optional here. So we have is optional, which is a decorator that we can apply to these fields. So like this. Okay, that is optional. And we also need our validation to work. So we always need the heading to be of length 5 and this. So this is our DTO, and what basically changed here is the optional decorator that we are using here. And in our post service, so data is going to be of type update post DTO like this. Okay, so now let's go on to update the post. We are going to first of all find this post and check if the post actually exists in our database. Okay, and we're going to await this dot repo dot we already have a method that finds a post, so this find one. So rather than repeating ourselves, we are just going to call this dot find one like this and pass over the ID. So if this method is called, we are going to, it returns a post, so we'll have the post here. Or otherwise, if there's no post found, we'll just have this error that will be returned to the front end. Okay, so we can go on to update the post, and I'll just use the object.assign to, first of all, the target is going to be our post, and then the sources is going to be the data like this. And then we are going to call save on this post. So we are going to say return this dot repo dot save, then we'll save the post. So we find the post, we go on to update the post, and we go on to save the post in the database. So let's go on to delete. And in order for us to delete a post, we are also going to call an async function, which we can call delete. Delete is also going to take in the ID of the post we intend to delete, which is going to be a number. And we are also going to find the post like this. So we're going to call this method to find the post we want to delete. And then we're going to return this dot repo. We'll call remove, and then we're going to pass the post over to the remove method. So these are the different CRUD operations that we have. So finding all posts, finding one post, creating a post, updating a post, and also going on to delete a post. Okay, and now let's go on to the controller to be able to handle all this. So in finding a post, nothing changes. So we can just go on to call the find all method that we have in our post service. Again, if you want to see how we put up this controller, I'm going to link it up here. Okay, and next we also have finding a post by a given ID. So I'll take off this console.log, and rather than find, I'm going to call find one. And because we get this ID from the URL, it's always going to be a string, and we can pass it into a number like this. So we'll pass the ID into a number here. So, and also in creating a post, nothing changes. We take the body with the body decorator, okay, and we also go on to discuss with the post service and create a post, okay. And which is left, updating a post. So patch is going to be a patch request, and we'll import patch from nest.js common, okay. And patch needs a path. We're going to call this path ID like this, okay. And then the method we would call update. Because it needs a parameter, we're also going to make use of the param decorator. We would call this ID, and the ID we receive is going to be a string, yeah. Okay, and to update, we would need to return this dot post service, and then we'll call update. Okay, update needs an ID, and we need to pass it into an integer, so ID, and it needs the data. Okay, so we're also going to get the data here, so we would need to get access to the data with the body decorator. We'll call the body, which is going to be of type what. So this is going to be update post DTO over here that we defined. Okay, if we go back there, we have these options to update our post. So we are going to pass the body here. Nice. And in deleting a post, we would go on to bring in the delete decorator, okay, coming from nest.js common. Delete also would take an ID. So we'll be expecting an ID from the URL, and we would call delete. And because we're expecting an ID, we'll just take param, which is going to, we'll call it ID. And here we'll still call it ID, which is going to be a string when we get it, okay, like this. And inside the delete method, okay, I just noticed I didn't spell it correctly. We need to return something, and I'm going to return this dot post service, and then dot delete like this, and we call it together with the ID, which needs to be a number. So we need to pass int and pass the ID. So these are our different methods. So we have a method now to create a post, which is for the C. We also have a method to update a post. We also have one to delete a post, and we also have one to get all the posts and to get a post by ID. Let's go on to test these different URLs that we have created here. So in our request.http, now if we try to get all the posts, I expect us to get an empty array because we don't have any post yet in our database. Okay, we don't have any post yet. So I'm going to so let's go on to get all the posts, and if we go on to send this request to fetch all the posts, we actually get an error, no metadata post for post was found. Okay, and basically whenever this error occurs is let's go over to the core entity first. Okay, so we've actually forgot something. So if we go over to our core entity, we need to mark this with the entity decorator like this, so that Nest.js TypeOrm will be aware that this is an entity. Okay, and if we come over to the post entity over here as well, we also need to mark this with the entity decorator coming from TypeOrm like this. So let's go on and send our request and see our response. So if we send the request, we get back an empty array. Why? Because we don't have a post. We have not created any post yet. So let's go on to create a post. And remember that this changes from description to content, okay? And content now is learning Nest.js. This actually is our first post, okay? And we can also test out our validation. So let's say we just try to create a post with a heading that's not up to 5 characters. So we say we get heading must be longer or equal to 5 characters, okay? So let's go on to create a post. And now our post gets created and is being returned. So our post have a heading, first post, a content of learning Nest.js, an ID of 1, created that, updated that, and by default our post is not published. And in a post with a specific ID, if we try to get a post with an ID of 10, we send out the request. Say not post found with the given ID, okay? But if we now try to get a post with an ID of 1, we see our post. So it's being created at this time, updated at. This is the heading of our post, and we can see is published is false. Okay, nice. And let's go on to what else? So we can now get our post again, and this is going to return the post that we just created. So let's go on to update a post. So I'm going to create another comment here, which I'll say update post like this. And it's going to be a path request to http localhost 3000, okay, and then /post, and it needs an ID, so we'll give it an ID of 1. So the content type is going to be application JSON, and then the body, okay. So let's say we just need to update the content, and the content of this post is going to be continue learning Nest.js. And the beautiful thing is, if you take a look at this created at and updated at, so this is when the post was created at. So the created at date should not change. We only need the updated at date to change, okay? So let's go on and send out this request. Now we get back the posts. So we still with an ID of 1, okay, because that's the post we edited. The created at time remains the same, but the updated at time automatically is being updated for us, in our database. And we can now go on to delete this post. So we can send a delete request. So I'll just copy this, okay, like this, and sending this request. Let's see. So I need to add a comment here. So delete a post with a specific ID. Same here. So update a post with a specific ID. So let's go on and delete this post. So now this post is being deleted, okay? And we get the deleted post returned. In some cases, you might not want to return anything back. So let's go on to fetch all our posts. So if we get all our posts, we get an empty array. We try to fetch that post again. We see there's no post found with a given ID. And we can also go on to create a post, which is now the post with an ID of 2. And we can update and now fetch that post with an ID of 2. We can update the post, okay, to continue learning Nest.js. If we needs to be an ID of 2, okay. So we send it, we update the post, and we can also go on now to get the post, okay. So that's it, guys, for CRUD in Nest.js. So there are obviously so many things lacking, because if we come back to our post entity, we don't have users yet, but our post is going to have a user. So we're going to know the user that created this actual post, and that's the next thing we are going to be working on. So next time I come back, we are going to go into creating our user entity, so how we can create and perform CRUD operations on our user, and then we can build up on that to perform relations between the different tables that we have in our database. So guys, if you like the content, please do give it a thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, please go on and subscribe, and see you guys later. Take care. Bye.